as our our projector boots up. I was probably like had this little back in the early '80s. The Volkswagen Rabbits and stuff had the brake lines running under the carpet. From the front of the car to the back, they ran under the carpet, and while they were running under the carpet, they were. There we go. Now it started. Sorry about that. But what's the problem with running brake lines or wires or anything else under the carpet?
You get stepped on. You get stepped on.
Not that. Brake lines can handle being stepped on. There's a lot of moisture that goes in there. And so whenever there's moisture where brake lines are, and how many times I told you guys about on pickup trucks, where people do a lot of mudding and stuff, the dirt and stuff goes up in there on the frame, and the brake lines are laying in that dirt, and every time it gets wet, you got a little bit of eating into the brake line. And then one day, and I've had this happen, I bought a little pickup, one time, and I drove it, and I was driving down the road after I bought it, and happy with the way it drove, and happy with my purchase and all that kind of thing, and I hit the brake, and it was like stepping on a plum. It went right to the floor, and then I looked under there, was brake fluid dripping out from under the left side of the truck. Well, anyway, had to get up under there and cut the part of the brake line out that rusted away, and double flare and put it all back together like it's supposed to be. Don't ever use copper tubing unions, with the little ferrules and stuff for fixing brake lines, because that ain't really safe, because you got too much pressure and it won't handle it. You need a double flare. All right, so basically, this Volkswagen that I was driving, I had brakes fail on two Volkswagens for two different reasons. The first time it failed was in 1981. I was driving a little Volkswagen Bug, and I turned into this convenience store parking lot. And on that old Volkswagen Bug, if you've ever fooled with one of those, the brake fluid reservoir behind the spare tire in the front. Of course, the engine's in the back on those. It was a '66 Volkswagen Bug. And that pipe that was going down into the master cylinder goes through a little rubber grommet. And that's supposed to contain your brake fluid as it feeds in there. Well, that rubber grommet has a tendency to start leaking a little bit. And what happens there is it ultimately empties your brake fluid reservoir a little at a time. And I've been keeping fluid in it. But anytime you got a leak and you say, well, I'll just keep fluid in it, that's okay. But if you're talking about brakes, I pulled in at this convenience store down there on 9th Avenue in Port Arthur. And whenever I hit the brake, I suddenly didn't have any because there was no fluid left. And I grabbed the park brake handle and jerked it up to try to stop it, and the cable broke. And so I went sailing over here and jumped over that little, parking curb there, and ran into a newspaper machine and just squished it all up against, made a mess out of that. But anyway, the point was, I did the same thing on a Rabbit I was driving, and there had been recalls on those that we did when I was at the Volkswagen dealer. This one had the recall done, but those lines are still under the carpet. You see, so and they like to leak when it rained too. So anyway, I had the same thing happen down at the traffic circle. I mashed the brake, and that time when I pulled the park brake, it held, and all that kind of stuff. But anyway, it's a good idea to be good slick on the parking brake. But in those two cases, I used the parking brake for an emergency. But that's really not what the parking brake is designed for. The parking brake is designed to keep it from rolling when you don't want it to roll. How many of you guys have ever seen a big truck where they would have a brake drum mounted on the place where the drive shaft comes out of the transmission? And that was your brake. Have you ever seen that? You've seen that. If you've been under a big truck, you'll see that, or like a 1.5 tons or something like that. But what you got here, you got this here, there's a little ratchet mechanism down there. You got your little equalizer. The little equalizer is basically, what's the equalizer there for? Is to make it where it goes out to both wheels. One of the most interesting things that I saw is, anybody ever ask you about any brake fluid for a Model T? You don't have brake fluid in there because they have mechanical brakes. Well, these Hudson cars that we had basically a mechanical backup system. So if you mashed the brakes and your hydraulic system failed, the backup system would go in and you'd have mechanical brakes. That's the way that was. All right, and so, but that's basically a little thing over here. You've also got this cable assembly and the release handle on your parking brake assembly. You got an electric switch. Now this electric switch is set up on some of them, and I don't know why. It seems to me like it's Nissan that does this. they'll have a situation where these little switches have got a little button, and it goes on, there's a little, sort of a rubber stopper that goes in a hole, and that button goes against that rubber stopper. When the rubber stopper wears out and comes out of there, now that little plunger on that switch is going through that hole, and everything, the stoplights are on all the time. So you gotta figure out a way to make that work. Vacuum diaphragm. How many people have ever seen one where whenever you put it in gear, it releases the park brake automatically? You ever seen that? Now that red Cadillac over there is set up that way, but that stuff is not working on that old 71 Cadillac. But there's a vacuum diaphragm. A lot of your higher end cars would have that. So, well, Crown Victorias, Lincolns, some of your GM cars, when you put it in gear. Now, how would you do that? How would you put vacuum to it only when you move the gear selector? You're going to engineer this. How are you going to engineer it?
Switch.
A switch.
Well,
Electric switch?
you run a vacuum line somehow to link it to when it moves it in the drive, it opens up that port, lets air go to
Yeah,
that.
you basically have something like a neutral safety switch that's got a vacuum line going to it and another going out of this. And when you put it in drive or reverse, anything out of park, it would allow vacuum to go up here and pull this release. Well, they had this lever. If, you gotta know it's there. It's not in your face like a lot of them for the vacuum diaphragm. If you have a diaphragm, if that system dies and the park brake is locked, you can release it by hand if you need to. And so that's the way you do that. And here's how basically it does. The actuator goes into your gear selection there, and you got engine vacuum. It's real simple, the vacuum motor and all that. So that was something that they felt like people might be able to use. Now the park brake on my doggone Taurus one time, what's a problem, by the way? Let me ask you this. What if your park brake light doesn't work? Is that a problem?
Yeah, I could drive down the road with it on.
That's what happened to me. I mean, these guys were putting an air conditioner compressor on I mentioned this a while back, but put an air conditioner compressor on there, and the guy that got through was a real conscientious guy, and when he pulled my car out there, he locked the park brake. Well, I never used the park brake. I figured if it said park, I ain't going nowhere anyway. And he locked the park brake good and hard. I didn't realize that. When you're backing out, the park brake don't hold that much anyway. When you're going forward, it tries to hold. But somehow or another, I managed to back out and get all the way to Enterprise before I realized that my brake fluid was boiling because I've been driving all the way to Enterprise with my park brake on because that red light didn't work. I didn't know it didn't work until then, But, all right, so a pedal or a lever, usually, you'll be able to jerk it up like that. And it's liable to be on anything. Now you get your parking brake handle. This seems like brainless stuff, but I'm telling you, we've got this vehicle, and I gotta get it over here from the warehouse, that Toyota Highlander, the park brakes are locked on it. And somebody's gonna get the joyful task of getting those park brakes unlocked. I gotta get them to get it over here. Probably going to pick it up with a forklift and haul it over here like a wrecker or something. But anyway, shift it into park without applying the parking brakes. Places the weight of the vehicle, the transmission, parking gear. Like basically, if you've got one that's sitting on a hill or something, and you got it in park, and that park pawl is in there, sometimes it's a little hard. It's kind of like when your steering wheel is turned to a steering wheel lock, and basically it's kind of bound up. You ever had that where you couldn't turn the key on, and then you had to grab the steering wheel and turn it? Well, if you've got it in a hard enough, on a tight enough hill, parking brake, even automatic, is pretty good for that. And so it prevents you from having all that kind of stuff. And this is a bunch of words, but you're not going to be able to have a mechanical system that's going to apply as much pressure. Now, the Chevrolets, like this white one that we got out here that are doing the transmissions work on, and the GMC and all, the ones that had the disc brakes, they've gone back to drum brakes in the back of the later model vehicles. Like if you might notice, that Mercury Sable has got disc brakes on the back of it, and my 2007 Taurus has got drum brake. So they're kind of going back to drum brakes, like on some of the pickups and stuff. And now they went to disc brakes, now they're going back to drum brakes and all that. But they'll have a hat, under there. Now some of you guys have already had your park brake, and we'll show those a little bit later, and this won't take very long to go through. Where you had to screw the piston back in on the back. You remember like that on the Sable? There's a lot of them like that. You need to know about how to do that. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on those dadgum things. But this FMVSS 105, which is regulation, requires the parking place has got to hold the vehicle stationary for 5 minutes on a 30% grade in the forward and reverse directions. Of course, it's less likely to hold in the reverse than it is the forward. It also specifies the force needed to apply the brakes cannot exceed 125 pounds for foot-operated brakes or 90 pounds for hand-operated brakes. And some full-size cars in the 70s and 80s had trouble meeting that brake holding requirements without exceeding application for it. Some of them, have you ever seen one where you pump the parking brake up? You pump it 2 or 3 times, and then you hit it again, it pops back off. I kind of like those guys right there when they're working right. They had a pedal with a high leverage ratio, required 2 or 3 applications. That's what I'm just talking about. The first pedal stroke partially applied, and then the ratchet mechanism held it in that position. And the second or third stroke applied it completely in a single pull on the release handle, release the brake. Some of them say push to release. Remember whenever I pulled the park brake release on that 65 Galaxy I used to drive, there would usually be dirt from the bottom of my shoe on there, and that thing would pops up so much it would just throw dirt in my face. I mean, because they'd be trapped in the rubber, you know, and all that stuff. All of them, now listen to this. This is a little bit of trivia here. You can win some Jeopardy here like this. All brake systems on passenger cars and light trucks built since 1967 have a warning lamp on the instrument panel to indicate a failure in 1/2 of the hydraulic system. That's standard, they gotta have that. On many vehicles, the same warning lamp will indicate a low fluid level in the master cylinder, and they also use that one to apply, indicate the parking brake is applied. And so you'll have a normally open switch. What does that mean? What's a normally open switch?
It's normally open.
Now, I don't really like this statement right here. I don't think it's correct. Is the parking brake switch normally open?
No.
Is the brake light switch normally open? It's not, is it? When you mash the brake, it closes. It's like a door jamb switch. It's not normally open either. It's normally closed. When you move whatever's touching it, it's gonna close. So that's not true, right? Ignition's gotta be on for the lamp to last. So just think about that really carefully. All right, you got some linkage here, you got a return spring, you got these cables here, you got equalizer. We had one time that was a 94 Ranger, I guess it had been driven through River Creek in the county, and when we got it in here doing the brakes, all of the springs in the rear were rusty, all of the park brake cables were rusty, everything in there was rusty. First time somebody applied the park brakes after we rebuilt the rear brakes, they wouldn't unapply. You know, so we had to replace all that stuff. And the park brake cables don't usually cost all that much, but it's really aggravating whenever you gotta go in there and do something to get them to release whenever they're hung up.
You know, you ever seen them park brakes on like an old vehicle, you have to press the pedal in and pull the lever?
Yeah,
They ain't working right.
yeah. And then some of them, I've got this, you know, that you pull out, a T-handle you pull out of the dash.
That's what I'm talking about,
Yeah,
but you gotta
yeah.
push the pedal.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, you gotta do it together at the same time, yeah. They also have this Mako brake lock, hydraulic brake lock thing that we used to put on some of the trucks that the fuelers were using when I was working in Texas. And it basically, you run all of your brake lines through this block, and whenever they got ready to lock it, they would flip this lever over, and when they mashed the brake, it would hold that pressure at those back wheels. And one day, and this is sort of a driveline thing, I put that thing, they told me, I said, put this on this truck here for this fueler. And this thing had one of those big old 8-liter Hauss diesel engines in it, big old ton and a half. I put that brake lock on there, and when we mashed the brake, you know, you could lock it up. Somebody backed it up there and locked it up. I mean, locked the brakes on it so it wouldn't roll. They were using the pump that was on the truck for a pumping operation. And this pumper that had just put this brake lock on that I had put in, the other guy from the next shift, whenever he came to take over that job, he didn't know about this. He didn't know that lever was down there. It's in plain sight when you open the door. All right, so whenever he started trying to back out of there, or pull out of there, actually it was backed up, he tried to drive out of there, it wouldn't go, and so he just kept giving it more and more until he twisted one of the axles in the back. I mean, and this axle was like, you know, 3 inches in diameter, and big old splined axles going out them floating axle hubs. And so I had to go in there and fix all that stuff, and everybody had to be educated on the Mako brake lock thing, you know. So anyway, you got really strong cables right here, threaded rods on the end. You've seen all that kind of stuff. Now, this right here is going to be your control cable adjustment rod to one rear to the other rear. Now, you were working on the brakes the other day. Whenever you looked at the park brakes on that Miata, You said that that equalizer was crooked or something. What was the reason for that? I didn't even,
Because I have one cable tied to it.
one cable was tighter than the other one? Okay. And, I need to find that other, at Allen. Somebody's got an Allen's, Allen's bit off of that kit out there too. We need to find that. But anyway, that provides a balanced brake force to each wheel. We'll see how long that stays. That other shop over there worked on them. Every time they worked on the brakes, he said they wanted me out of park brakes work good for 2 or 3 days, and then they quit working again, you know.
Or if they had any complaints about it.
No, not yet. This particular, I'm hoping we don't. This kind of connector right here, this is kind of tricky and aggravating if you don't know how it all works. This is like the Ranger has on it. But whenever, you gotta be able to pull that past it and hook it back in. And you know the park brake cable that goes up into the, like you see on this little brake set I got out here on the bench? You know how you get that park brake cable out of that backing plate? Anybody know that? You know the park brake cable it snaps into the backing plate with the little fingers that spread out around that hole. You know how you get it out of there?
Yeah, pinch the teeth.
What'd you pinch it with though?
Or vice versa.
No?
What are the vice grips?
We talked about it. Me and you, I think, talked about it. Hose clamp.
Hose clamp.
Get a little hose clamp and put on there, tie that hose clamp down, then it was pulled right out of there. See, that's how you're gonna do that. And so, but that's this kind of thing right here. All right, so cable retainers and hooks you got right here. These right here may not seem important, but whenever you leave something unhooked and it gets over to where it doesn't belong and you have a problem, you'll get some training on that. You got a little spring clip right there of some kind. Usually that looks kind of chintzy. Usually you see a wide blade type spring steel thing. Most control cables and rear brake cables are partially covered with a flexible metal conduit. Sometimes they're coated with plastic and all that kind of thing. The cable slides inside the conduit and is protected from rubbing against there. What'd you need there? Come on. A little bit of work order. I'll be through in just a few minutes. All right, so, okay, so that one right there, we gotta fix the 4-wheel drive on it. Who wants to fix the 4-wheel drive?
What's wrong?
I know some of you guys really love 4-wheel drive, and all that.
What's wrong?
That stub axle that goes up in the front end had actually come out of there and sheared off its little, this is the one the ball joint popped off on and it caused issues. And so, we gotta put a CV axle in it. We also gotta take the cover off the front end and see if any parts in there are gonna be replaced and all that, but anyway, she's over here to do that. All right, so, see that, this is what I was talking about. See the little cable retainer, like I was talking about earlier? Because you put a clamp on that, and you pull that out of there, and it's fast to a bracket. You've seen it, these look real familiar to you, I can tell. A lot of them are coated with nylon or plastic, it lets them slide more easily through the conduit. But I will tell you that all kinds of cables can give trouble. The shift cable on your transmission, if you got one that's really, really stiff, how would you tell if the shift cable was a problem? Incidentally, I'm gonna talk about shift cables for a second. If you've got a shift cable that you suspect is being a problem, that's making it hard to get in gear, how would you determine it was a shift cable and not something else?
Unhook it down there at the bottom.
Unhook it in the transmission and see if it gets easier, right? And if it's still hard with it unhooked from the transmission, you know you're gonna have a shift cable with you, and that's more common than you would imagine. Somebody put a shift, I bought a shift cable for that Neon and somebody put it on there, but they just kind of slopped it on there and they let it lay over against the exhaust so that it got burned up and messed up again. You know, so, I mean, I had to order another one. Them things are about $100 a pop.
Yeah, I've had to put 2 of them
So be careful not to mess up something with the idea that we'll just get a nut. You know what I mean? That's not a good plan. Because a lot of times somebody will come to me and say, can you get me another one of these? And a lot of times you can't get one that easy. And you're digging and hunting and it causes all kinds of extra work. Keep up with everything. Some of them got an intermediate lever under the vehicle body, so on and so forth. Equalizer and adjusters. I hate slides with a lot of words on them. The part that brakes a fly-by lever working on the secondary shoe. Now, what kind of brakes are these? Somebody tell me.
Dual servo.
Huh?
No.
Leading train.
Leading, trailing. That's right. So they're anchored at the bottom and the top. All right. Now this one right here is a different kind right here. This is like we had on the dual servo brakes. You can see that. This is not a big deal. You've seen this before. The ones with the hat are the ones I like the best. Perfectly honest, I really like these kind, and it's really common on some cars. Some of them are still fooling around with these silly things here though. See how that's made on the inside? screw and nut operation, GM float and caliper rear disc brakes are the most common example of the screw and nut parking brake. But I've seen these on all kinds of vehicles, but if you see one of those, make darn sure you know what you're working on. If you see cable stuff going to the back of that caliper, you know that you're not gonna be able to push it in there with your brake caliper. Incidentally, on our brake caliper squeeze, in one of our brake caliper squeezers, people weren't greasing the threads and it locked up and got burned, and so I threw it away. So we gotta get another one.
Which one was that? The one with red handle?
No, the red, one that had this wrench handle on it was messed up, it got to where it wouldn't move. And so basically, you got a ball and ramp. See, some of them have got a little ball and ramp operation, they're similar to this, but they, instead of having the screw operation, they got a ball and ramp deal. And, you know, you gotta run it back up about the same way. Now, this one right here is one like I was talking about earlier. See the driveline parking brakes, how they got brake shoes around the drive shaft where it's coming out? That's a transmission in front of that, by the way. Chrysler used this external band parking brake drum on the cars and light truck until 1960. And see, that's what it looks like. See how it's got a brake drum on there coming out of the drive shaft? Light medium duty trucks use them today. Well, the problem with that is you take the drive shaft out and you think you got park brakes, you ain't got none. They'll just roll out all the way with you. All right, the brake shoes and the back end plate, you know, they're going to a lot of, but you got a cable going in there to that thing. This is the same kind that we're talking about. And that's the end of it. So, tell me something you learned about parking brakes that you didn't already know. Huh? Yeah, that driveline parking brake. Now, when you see it, you'll notice what you're looking at, won't you? On some of them, let me finish up with this, you'll see a handle in the floor, and it's like a little spring-loaded handle that goes clink, and you know, it's not like a, you know, it's like it just kind of high centers, and you can actually tighten them parking brakes by turning that handle and put more tension on them. You can adjust them by turning the handle. Have you ever seen that? Well, that's really cool, because they got a little knurled handle on them. You can turn it and pull it up like that. I've seen.
Yeah, we got one like that in our forklift at work.
Yeah, that way you're talking about, yeah, it's just set up the same way, so. All right. All right. Well, I hope I didn't put anybody to sleep.